Welcome to our podcast, Upgrade Your Brain. I'm your host, Alex.
And I'm Sarah. Today, we're diving into a fascinating topic that affects all of us: how to improve our memory and learning ability.
That's right, Sarah. We're going to explore 4 key habits that can dramatically enhance our memory effectiveness. I think our listeners will find this information not just useful, but potentially life-changing.
Absolutely, Alex. In today's world of information overload, these skills are more crucial than ever. So, let's jump right in.
The first and perhaps most critical habit is attention. Sarah, in your experience, how do you think our modern lifestyle affects our ability to pay attention?
Well, Alex, it's no secret that we live in a world full of distractions. Our smartphones, in particular, are constant attention grabbers.
That's true. What do you think about the impact of notifications on our memorization process?
Even a simple notification on our phone can completely disrupt the process of memorization. It's not just about the time we spend looking at the notification. The mere act of checking it can derail our focus.
That's a sobering thought. What measures would you recommend?
Here's where it gets interesting and maybe a bit controversial. I would recommend turning off all notifications during learning sessions.
Wow, all notifications. That seems drastic.
It does, doesn't it? But when you think about it, it makes sense. Learning is something we do almost every day. If it's so vital, why dilute the quality of our learning?
That's a good point. And I suppose this ties into the idea of getting information before we can forget it, right?
Exactly. We could say it like this: before you can forget anything, you have to get it in the first place. It's all about proper registration of information in our memory, and that requires our full attention.
I can see how this would be challenging for many people, myself included, but it's definitely food for thought.
Now, let's move on to the second habit: comprehension. This is about truly understanding the information we're trying to learn.
I've always thought that memorization and understanding go hand in hand. Is that not the case?
Not exactly. Many people jump into learning with the intention to remember, but I argue that comprehension should be our primary intention.
Interesting. So it's not just about memorizing facts, but really grasping the concepts.
Precisely. I'd phrase it like this: first understand, then remember. This approach leads to better retention in the long run.
That makes sense. Are there any specific techniques for improving comprehension?
Yes, I'd highlight 2 main methods. The first is association.
Like linking new information to something we already know.
Exactly. For example, you could explain proper and improper fractions by drawing stick figures: a small head on a big body for proper fractions, and a big head on a small body for improper fractions.
That's a vivid image. I can see how that would stick in your memory.
Right. The second method is what I call the checkpoint technique.
What's that about?
It's about periodically pausing during your learning to recap. You ask yourself, what are the 3-5 key ideas I've learned so far? And crucially, can you rephrase these ideas in your own words?
Oh, I like that. It's like a mini self-test as you go along.
Exactly. And it's a great way to ensure you're truly comprehending the material, not just passively absorbing it.
All right, so we've covered attention and comprehension. What's the third habit?
The third habit is recall, and this is where things get really interesting.
How so?
Many people might think that to improve memory, you need to memorize more, but that's not necessarily the case.
No, what then?
If you want to improve your capacity to memorize information, you should recall more. It's about actively bringing information out of your memory, not just putting it in.
That's fascinating. So it's like exercising a muscle.
Exactly. Just like you become a better swimmer by swimming more, you become better at remembering by practicing recall more.
So how can our listeners incorporate more recall into their learning?
Never end a learning session without a recall session. This could be a self-test where you close the book or your eyes and mentally recall the key points you've learned.
That sounds doable. Any other suggestions?
Yes, and this is perhaps even more effective. Teach what you've learned to someone else. As the saying goes, the best way to learn something is to teach it.
I can see how that would force you to really engage with the material. You can't teach something you don't understand, after all.
Exactly. It's a powerful way to reinforce your learning and improve your recall.
Okay, so we've covered attention, comprehension, and recall. What's the fourth and final habit?
The fourth habit is application, and this is where we bridge the gap between learning and real-world results.
So it's about putting what we've learned into practice.
Exactly. I want to point out a common problem in today's world, what I call an input addiction.
Input addiction, what's that?
It's the tendency to constantly consume new information without ever applying it. Think about how easy it is to watch educational videos, read articles, or listen to podcasts like this one.
I feel called out.
Don't we all? I want to emphasize that while input or learning is easy, output or application is what's truly challenging and valuable.
I can see that. It's one thing to watch a video about a new skill, and another thing entirely to actually practice that skill.
Precisely. I'd sum it up like this. It's not about what you learn, it's about what you do with what you learn that makes a difference.
That's powerful. Do you have any advice on how to incorporate more application into our learning?
Yes, I'd stress the importance of deliberate practice. After learning something new, immediately think about how you can apply it in your life or work. Create opportunities to use your new knowledge or skills.
I can see how that would not only reinforce the learning but also make it more meaningful and relevant.
Absolutely. I'd use the term deep learning to describe this approach where you not only understand and remember the information but can also apply it effectively in real-world situations.
Wow, Sarah, that's a lot to take in. These 4 habits: attention, comprehension, recall, and application seem simple on the surface, but they're quite profound when you think about it.
They really are, Alex. And what struck me was the thought about our education system. Many of us struggle with these habits because we were never explicitly taught them in school.
That's a great point. It's not about intelligence, but about having the right tools and techniques.
Exactly. Learning without these habits is like driving a car with the brakes engaged. You can move forward, but it's a real struggle.
And I suppose implementing these habits is like releasing the brakes and filling up with high-grade fuel.
That's a perfect analogy. These habits can really supercharge our learning and memory.
Well, I don't know about you, Sarah, but I'm inspired to start applying these habits in my own life, and I hope our listeners are too.
Absolutely, Alex. Remember, everyone pay attention, strive for true comprehension, practice active recall, and most importantly, apply what you learn.
Great summary, Sarah. And with that, we'll wrap up today's episode of Upgrade Your Brain. Thanks for listening, everyone, and until next time, keep learning and applying.
Goodbye, and don't forget to turn off those notifications during your next study session.